At Christmas dinner, my rich grandpa asked, "Do you like the house I bought you?" I blinked and asked him back, "What house?" My mom froze. Grandpa stood up, turned to my parents and yelled, "Show me the deed now." And just like that, our perfect family Christmas shattered. The silence in the room was deafening, as 20 years of lies began to unravel before my eyes. I never imagined discovering that the people I trusted most had been stealing from me my entire life. My name is Noel Williams, and until that Christmas day, I thought I knew my family. I was 26 years old, working as a graphic designer at a small agency in downtown Seattle. The pay was decent, but not great. I lived in a tiny studio apartment that cost way too much, ate ramen more often than I cared to admit, and constantly worried about my student loan payments. But I was making it work, or so I thought. My grandfather, Theodore Williams, or Theo as he insisted everyone call him, was the family patriarch, a self-made millionaire who built his fortune in commercial real estate during the 80s and 90s. He owned dozens of properties across Washington state. He grew up poor in rural Montana, the son of a coal miner, and never forgot where he came from, even after he made it big. Hard work and honesty, he would tell me when I was growing up, those two things will take you further than any fancy degree. He had a deep, booming voice that commanded respect, but his eyes always softened when he looked at me. My parents, Jack and Martha, managed many of Grandpa Theo's properties. They lived comfortably in a beautiful colonial-style home in one of Seattle's upscale neighborhoods. My father handled the business side, while my mother managed tenant relations. They were always busy, always talking about properties and investments when I was growing up. Growing up, I idolized my grandfather. He was strict but fair, demanding but generous. When I graduated high school with honors, he took me to New York for a week. When I got accepted to art school, he was the one who told me to follow my passion even when my parents suggested more practical majors. "Your grandmother was an artist," he told me once, showing me her paintings that still hung in his home. "She saw beauty where others saw nothing special. You have that same gift, Noel." Christmas at Grandpa Theo's mansion was a family tradition. He would decorate the entire place like something out of a magazine, with a 12-foot tree in the main hall and lights covering every inch of the sprawling property. The dinner was always catered by the best chefs in Seattle, and gifts were piled high under the tree. This particular Christmas was special because Grandpa Theo had recovered from a health scare earlier that year. At 72, he had suffered a minor heart attack that reminded us all that he wouldn't be around forever. I had made him a hand-drawn portrait of himself and my late grandmother based on their wedding photo, and I was excited to give it to him. I arrived early to help with last-minute preparations. The house smelled like pine and cinnamon, and holiday music played softly in the background. Everything seemed perfect, except I noticed my parents acting strange. They kept having whispered conversations that stopped whenever I approached. My mother seemed especially nervous, checking her phone constantly. "Everything okay, Mom?" I asked as I arranged the silverware on the dining table. "Of course, sweetie," she replied with a tight smile. "Just some tenant issues. You know how people can be during the holidays." But something felt off. At one point, I walked past the kitchen and heard my father's urgent whisper to my mother, "We need to tell her before he does." "Tell me what?" I wondered, but I didn't press the issue. Family drama before Christmas dinner was the last thing anyone wanted. Later, when my mother left her phone on the counter while helping the catering staff, a text notification caught my eye. I wasn't trying to snoop, but the message preview was impossible to miss. "We can't keep hiding it. Theo knows." A chill ran down my spine. What were they hiding? And what did Grandpa Theo know? Before I could think more about it, the doorbell rang. More family had arrived, and soon the house was filled with conversation and laughter. But beneath my smile, questions swirled in my mind like snowflakes in a storm. Grandpa Theo's dining room could easily seat 20 people, and that night it was nearly full. My brother Aaron couldn't make it because he was teaching English in Japan, but my aunts, uncles, and cousins were all there. Crystal glasses sparkled under the chandelier, and the long mahogany table was covered with a feast. Roast turkey, honey-glazed ham, 5 different sides, and my grandfather's favorite bourbon pecan pie for dessert. I was seated directly across from my parents, and to the right of my grandfather, who sat at the head of the table. My mother kept fidgeting with her napkin, and my father was on his second glass of wine before the first course was served. "So, Noel," my grandfather said as the main course was being served, "how's that apartment of yours? Still in that same place downtown?" "Yes, same place," I replied. "It's small but close to work, so I can't complain." "Rent must be steep in that area," he continued, cutting his turkey with precision. "You managing okay financially?" My mother jumped in before I could answer. "Noel's doing great at that design firm. They just gave her more responsibilities, right, honey?" "Well, yes," I said, "but not exactly a raise to go with those responsibilities. Rent takes about half my paycheck, to be honest." Grandpa Theo frowned. "Half your paycheck? That doesn't sound right." "It's Seattle, Dad," my father interjected with a forced laugh. "Real estate prices are insane these days. You of all people should know that." "Even so," Grandpa continued, his eyes still on me, "with your trust fund payments, you should be able to afford something better." I paused, my fork halfway to my mouth. Trust fund payments? An uncomfortable silence fell over our section of the table. My grandfather's expression changed from confusion to suspicion in an instant. "The monthly payments," he clarified, "from the trust I set up for you after college graduation." I shook my head slowly. "Grandpa, I don't know what you're talking about. What trust fund?" He put down his utensils carefully, too carefully, like he was afraid he might break them. "The trust fund I established for you 5 years ago. Your parents are the trustees until you turn 30. His voice was controlled, but I could hear the tension building. "And what about the house? Is it being well maintained?" "What house?" I asked, completely lost. "Do you like the house I bought you?" he asked, his voice now deadly serious. "What house?" I repeated, genuinely confused. My mother's wine glass slipped from her fingers, spilling red liquid across the white tablecloth. My father had gone completely pale. Grandpa Theo stood up slowly, his napkin falling to the floor as he turned to face my parents. "Show me the deed now," he demanded, his voice booming through the dining room. "Now." The entire table fell silent. 20 pairs of eyes watched as my father stammered. "There's been a misunderstanding, Theo. We can explain." My mother started crying silently, mascara running down her cheeks. "A misunderstanding?" Grandpa repeated, his voice dangerously quiet now. "I bought Noelle a house for her college graduation, a 3-bedroom Craftsman on Maple Street. I set up a trust fund that pays her $6,000 every month. Are you telling me she knows nothing about either?" I felt like I couldn't breathe. $6,000 a month? A house? For 5 years? That was over $400,000, not counting the value of the house itself. "We were going to tell her," my mother sobbed. "We just thought she wasn't ready for that kind of responsibility. We were protecting her." "Protecting her?" Grandpa Theo's face was turning red. "By stealing from her?" My father stood up now too, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. "Now wait just a minute," he said, his voice rising. "We've been managing your properties for 20 years. 20 years of dealing with tenants and repairs and paperwork while you played the generous patriarch. Noelle was always your favorite, always got special treatment. What about us? What about Aaron? Don't we deserve something for all our work?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My parents had been stealing my inheritance, living off money meant for me, and now my father was trying to justify it? "You've been paid very well for your work," Grandpa shot back. "I gave you a house, cars, vacations. I paid for Aaron's college education in full. And this is how you repay me? By stealing from your own daughter?" My father's face contorted with anger. "We deserved more. We built your empire while you took all the credit." "Stop it," I shouted, surprising even myself with the volume. "Just stop. Is it true? You've been keeping a house and trust fund from me? For 5 years?" My mother couldn't meet my eyes. "We were renting the house out," she admitted quietly. "The market is so good right now, and we were saving some of the trust money for you. Honestly, we were." "Some of it?" Grandpa Theo asked sharply. "What about the rest?" No one answered, but the silence said everything. "How much of my money did you actually save?" I asked, my voice shaking. More silence. That's what I thought, I said, standing up. I need some air. I walked out of the dining room with as much dignity as I could muster. But as soon as I was in the hallway, I broke into a run. I grabbed my coat and burst outside into the cold December night, gulping in the winter air as tears streamed down my face. My own parents had been stealing from me for years while I worked overtime to make rent, while I ate cheap food and worried about bills, while I put off doctor's appointments because I couldn't afford the copay. They had betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible, and I had no idea how to process it. I sat on a stone bench in Grandpa Theo's garden, watching my breath form clouds in the freezing air, trying to make sense of a world that had just been turned upside down. The next morning, Christmas Day, I woke up in one of Grandpa Theo's guest rooms. After about an hour in the garden, he had come out to find me, wrapped me in his coat, and brought me back inside. My parents had already left, along with most of the other guests. No one had touched the dessert. Get some sleep, he had told me. Tomorrow, we'll figure this out. I barely slept, my mind replaying the dinner scene over and over. By the time I came downstairs, Grandpa was already in the kitchen making coffee. "Merry Christmas," he said softly, handing me a steaming mug. "Is it?" I asked, taking the coffee gratefully. He sighed, the weight of his 72 years showing on his face. "No, I suppose not. But we're going to make it right. First things first, I want to show you something." After a quick breakfast, we got into his Mercedes and drove across town. We stopped in front of a beautiful craftsman-style home with a wide front porch and mature maple trees in the yard. It was in one of Seattle's most desirable neighborhoods, close to parks and good schools. "This is yours," Grandpa Theo said simply. "I bought it for you 5 years ago when you graduated from college." I stared at the house in disbelief. It was exactly the kind of home I had always dreamed of owning someday, with character and charm that new constructions just didn't have. "Can we go inside?" I asked. Grandpa shook his head. "Not today. Your parents have tenants in there on a lease. We'll have to handle that legally, but soon, I promise." Next, we drove downtown to a sleek office building. The lobby directory listed Harrison Law Offices on the 10th floor. Grandpa Theo clearly had an appointment, as the receptionist immediately showed us into a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Jeffrey Harrison was a trim man in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair and wire-rimmed glasses. He greeted my grandfather warmly before turning to me with a sympathetic smile. "Noel, I'm sorry to meet under these circumstances," he said, shaking my hand. "I've been your grandfather's attorney for 20 years, and I helped set up your trust." For the next hour, Jeffrey explained the details of what should have been mine. The trust had been established 5 years ago with an initial deposit of $100,000, plus monthly contributions from the rental income of 3 commercial properties. After management fees and taxes, approximately $6,000 should have been deposited into my account monthly. So over 5 years, that's... I tried to calculate in my head, but the numbers were too overwhelming. Approximately $360,000 in trust payments, Jeffrey confirmed. Plus, the house is worth about $500,000 in today's market. The rental income from the house for the past 5 years would be roughly another $140,000. I felt dizzy. Nearly $1 million, all while I had been pinching pennies, worrying about student loans, and living paycheck to paycheck. "Your parents were the trustees," Jeffrey continued. "They had a fiduciary responsibility to manage these assets in your best interest. Instead, it appears they diverted the funds for personal use and kept the rental income from your property. Can we get it back?" I asked. Jeffrey and Grandpa exchanged looks. "We can try," Jeffrey said carefully. "But first, we need to determine exactly what happened to the money. I've already requested bank records." "What about criminal charges?" Grandpa Theo asked, his voice tight with anger. "That's an option," Jeffrey acknowledged. "But it might be better to try to resolve this civilly first. They are still her parents." My parents. I had been so shocked and angry that I hadn't even tried to contact them since the dinner. Now, I pulled out my phone. No calls or texts from either one. "I need to talk to them," I said. "Are you sure that's wise?" Grandpa asked. "No," I admitted. "But I need to hear what they have to say for themselves." After leaving Jeffrey's office, I asked Grandpa to drop me at my parents' house. He was reluctant but agreed, making me promise to call him if things got difficult. The house I grew up in looked the same as always, decorated for Christmas with wreaths and twinkling lights. It felt like a lie now, a pretty facade hiding ugly secrets. My father answered the door, his expression guarded. "Noel, come in." My mother was in the living room, her eyes red from crying. The Christmas tree in the corner was surrounded by unopened presents. "Where's my money?" I asked without preamble. "Sit down, please," my mother said. "We need to explain." I remained standing. "Explain what?" "How you stole from me. How you watched me struggle financially for years while sitting on a fortune that was rightfully mine." "We were protecting you," my father insisted. "You were too immature to handle that kind of money. You would have blown it all." "That wasn't your decision to make," I shouted. "It was my money, my house." "You were 21, my mother said. "Just out of art school with no real-world experience. We were going to tell you eventually, when you were ready." "Ready?" I repeated incredulously. "I'm 26 years old. I've been working full-time for 5 years. When exactly would I have been ready?" My parents exchanged glances but said nothing. "The truth is, you were never going to tell me," I continued. "You got used to having access to my money. You liked controlling it, controlling me." "That's not fair," my father protested. "Not fair?" I was nearly screaming now. "You stole almost $1 million from me. You let me struggle and worry and sacrifice while you, what? Took vacations? Bought luxury cars? What did you do with my money?" "We have expenses too, Noel," my father said defensively. "The lifestyle your grandfather expected us to maintain isn't cheap. Do you know how hard we've worked managing his properties all these years?" "So this is about Grandpa?" I asked. "You were angry at him, so you stole from me?" "No, of course not," my mother said quickly. "We love you, Noel. We were going to set everything right." "When?" I demanded. "When were you going to set everything right?" Neither of them answered. I walked over to my father's desk in the corner of the living room, a heavy antique piece where he always kept important documents. I started opening drawers. "What are you doing?" he asked, alarmed. "Looking for answers," I replied. In the bottom drawer, beneath a stack of manila folders, I found a leather portfolio embossed with the logo of my parents' management company. Inside were documents I shouldn't have been able to understand, but 5 years working with contracts at the design agency had taught me enough. These weren't just papers about my trust. There were documents relating to several of Grandpa Theo's properties, accounting statements, bank transfers, tenant agreements, and the numbers didn't add up. "You've been stealing from Grandpa too," I said, looking up at my parents with new understanding, not just my trust. "You've been embezzling from his business for years." My mother burst into fresh tears. My father lunged for the portfolio, but I pulled it away. "How much?" I asked. "How much have you stolen altogether?" "You don't understand the pressure we've been under," my father said, his voice suddenly pleading rather than defensive. "Your grandfather's expectations, the hours we work. We deserved compensation. He paid you. He gave you a house, cars, everything." "It wasn't enough," my father insisted. "Not for what we've done for him." I stuffed the portfolio into my bag. "I'm taking these to Grandpa and Jeffrey." "Noel, wait," my mother begged. "We can work this out as a family. There's no need to make things worse." I looked at the woman who had raised me, who had tucked me in at night and bandaged my skinned knees, who had taught me to read and to bake cookies, and I realized I didn't know her at all. "You're the ones who made things worse," I said quietly. "You did this, not me." I walked out of the house without looking back, the portfolio clutched to my chest, containing proof that my family's betrayal ran even deeper than I had imagined. The days after Christmas passed in a blur of meetings with lawyers, accountants, and bank officials. The evidence in the portfolio was damning. My parents hadn't just stolen from my trust. They had been systematically embezzling from Grandpa Theo's business for years, skimming from property management fees, inflating maintenance costs, and even creating ghost tenants in some buildings to pocket the rent. I struggled with whether to show everything to my grandfather. He was still recovering from his heart attack earlier that year, and I worried that the full extent of my parents' betrayal might be too much for him. But keeping it from him felt wrong too, like I would be participating in the deception. He needs to know, I finally decided, sitting in Jeffrey's office 3 days after Christmas. He trusted them with everything. He deserves the truth. When we showed Grandpa Theo the evidence, he sat very still, his weathered hands resting on the arms of his chair. I couldn't read his expression. "How much?" he asked simply. Jeffrey cleared his throat. "Preliminary estimates suggest around $2 million over the past decade, possibly more. We're still uncovering accounts." Grandpa Theo closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, they were clear and determined. "I want it all back," he said. "Every penny they stole from Noel and from me, and I want them out of my business immediately. Change the locks, freeze the accounts, whatever needs to be done." Meanwhile, my parents had begun a campaign of manipulation. They called relatives, telling their version of events, that there had been a misunderstanding about the trust, that they had always intended to transfer everything to me, that Grandpa Theo was overreacting, and I was being ungrateful. The family quickly divided into camps. My aunts and uncles who depended on Grandpa Theo financially sided with him. Those who had always been jealous of my parents' position in the family business seemed almost gleeful about their downfall. A few, mostly distant cousins who didn't know the details, thought we should work things out privately. My phone filled with messages ranging from supportive to accusatory. Always knew Jack and Martha were shady. "Stay strong, Noel. Family should stick together no matter what. Why are you doing this to your parents? Is it true you're suing Aunt Martha and Uncle Jack? That's messed up." The worst were the messages from my parents themselves. My mother sent tearful voice messages about how much she loved me and how this mistake shouldn't tear our family apart. My father alternated between angry demands that I come to my senses and appeals to family loyalty. One day, they even showed up at my workplace. I was in the middle of a client presentation when the receptionist nervously interrupted to say my parents were in the lobby causing a scene. By the time I got there, my father was shouting at the building security while my mother sobbed dramatically. "Is this how we raised you?" my father demanded when he saw me. "To abandon your family when they need you? To side with your grandfather against your own parents?" "You need to leave," I said, mortified as coworkers and strangers stared at the unfolding drama. "This is my workplace. We wouldn't have to come here if you'd answer our calls," he shouted. Security finally escorted them out, but the damage was done. My boss called me into his office afterward and gently suggested I take some time off to sort out my personal issues. It wasn't a suspension, he assured me, but it felt like one. The final blow came when my brother Aaron suddenly returned from Japan. I had been leaving messages for him for days, trying to explain what had happened, but he hadn't responded. Then he showed up at my apartment unannounced, his face tight with anger. "What the hell are you doing?" he demanded. As soon as I opened the door, "You're destroying our family over money?" "It's not about the money," I tried to explain. "It's about the lies, the theft, the betrayal. So Mom and Dad made a mistake," he dismissed. "They were going to make it right. You didn't have to go nuclear and get Grandpa involved. They stole almost $1 million from me, Aaron, and millions more from Grandpa. That's not a mistake. That's a crime." Aaron ran his hand through his hair in frustration. "You've always been Grandpa's favorite. Always got special treatment. Must be nice to have a trust fund and a house just handed to you." "I didn't even know about them until a week ago," I protested. "I've been working and struggling while Mom and Dad stole from me." "Oh, poor Noel," he mocked. "Living in Seattle, working your dream job in graphic design. Such a hard life." Something about his reaction seemed off. He was too angry, too dismissive of serious crimes. "You knew," I realized suddenly. "You knew what they were doing." He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Did you benefit from it too?" I pressed. "Did they send you money in Japan?" "They help me out sometimes," he admitted defensively. "What's wrong with parents supporting their children?" "It wasn't their money to give," I shouted. "It was stolen from me and from Grandpa." Aaron's face hardened. "You have no idea what Mom and Dad have sacrificed for us, for this family. You're being selfish and naive." If you go through with this lawsuit, don't expect me to ever speak to you again." After he left, I collapsed onto my couch, emotionally exhausted. Out of habit, I checked my phone and saw a text from an unknown number with an attachment. The message read, "You should see this. Not everyone in your family is as they seem." Cautiously, I opened the attachment. It was a screenshot of a group text between my parents and Aaron from 3 years ago. "Mom, transfer complete. Extra 2 kelvins this month as requested. Aaron, thanks. Noel still clueless? Dad, completely. She actually apologized for asking us for rent help last month. Aaron, classic. Keep the golden goose in the dark. Works for me. Mom, Theodore would have a fit if he knew. Be careful what you say around him. Aaron, no worries. Our little secret." I stared at the screen in disbelief. They had been laughing at me, making fun of my financial struggles while stealing my money. And my brother had been in on it the whole time. The unknown number turned out to belong to my cousin Tara, who had been included in some family group chats. She had more screenshots documenting years of deception. In that moment, my last hope of reconciliation died. This hadn't been a misunderstanding or a temporary lapse in judgment. It had been a deliberate, sustained conspiracy to steal from me and from Grandpa Theo, while pretending to care about me. I forwarded everything to Jeffrey. Then I blocked my parents' and Aaron's numbers. The family I thought I had was gone. It was time to focus on rebuilding my life from the wreckage of their betrayal. January arrived with freezing temperatures and the coldest atmosphere I had ever experienced in my family. Grandpa Theo, acting on Jeffrey's advice, had filed lawsuits against my parents for the embezzlement from his business and breach of fiduciary duty regarding my trust. I was named as a co-plaintiff in the trust case. The legal process was exhausting and confusing. I spent hours with Jeffrey and his team, going through financial records, signing affidavits, and preparing for depositions. My parents hired an aggressive attorney who specialized in white-collar defense, making it clear they weren't going to simply return the money and apologize. The stress took a visible toll on Grandpa Theo. He looked older suddenly, the lines in his face deeper, his shoulders slightly stooped. I worried about him constantly, especially when he started complaining about chest pain again. "You should rest more," I told him one evening as we sat in his study reviewing documents. "This can wait until tomorrow. Time is money," he replied with a weak smile. "And in this case, it's your money we're trying to recover. I won't rest until we get back what's rightfully yours." 2 days later, I received a panicked call from his housekeeper. Grandpa Theo had collapsed while getting the mail. Another heart attack. I rushed to the hospital, terrified that I might lose the only family member I still trusted. He survived, but the doctors were concerned. "He needs to reduce his stress levels," the cardiologist told me in the hallway outside his room. "His heart can't take much more of this." When I was finally allowed to see him, he looked small and vulnerable in the hospital bed, hooked up to monitors and an IV. His eyes were closed, and for a moment, I feared the worst. Then he opened them and managed a faint smile. "Quite a scare I gave everyone," he said hoarsely. I took his hand, fighting back tears. "You need to take it easy, Grandpa." He sighed. "I feel like a fool, Noel. I trusted your parents completely, gave them control of my business, my properties, made them trustees of your inheritance. And all this time, they were stealing from both of us." "It's not your fault," I assured him. "But it is," he insisted. "I should have checked, should have verified, should have made sure you were receiving your trust payments. Instead, I assumed everything was being handled properly." He closed his eyes again, a tear slipping down his weathered cheek. "I failed you." "No," I said firmly. "They failed us both, but we're going to fix it together. Right now, though, you need to focus on getting better." While Grandpa Theo recovered in the hospital, my own life continued to unravel. My temporary leave from work had extended to over 3 weeks, and my boss was making noises about needing to fill my position if I couldn't return soon. My anxiety was through the roof. I couldn't sleep, couldn't concentrate, couldn't even enjoy the things that usually brought me comfort, like drawing or watching movies. I finally admitted I needed help and started seeing a therapist, Dr. Winters. In our first session, I poured out the whole sordid story, from the Christmas dinner revelation to the ongoing legal battle. What you're experiencing is a form of betrayal trauma, she explained. When people we fundamentally trust violate that trust, especially parents, it shakes our entire sense of security and identity. I feel like I don't even know who I am anymore, I confessed. Everything I thought about my family, my childhood, my relationships, feels like a lie. That's a natural response, she assured me. Your brain is having to reprocess years of memories in a new context. It's like suddenly discovering the map you've been following was completely wrong. The therapy helped, but my practical problems continued to mount. My apartment building was sold to a developer who planned to convert the units to condominiums. All tenants received notice that our leases would not be renewed. I had 60 days to find a new place to live. Meanwhile, my parents filed a countersuit claiming they had verbal agreements with Grandpa Theo about compensation for managing his properties. They alleged that the trust and house were actually part of that compensation, not gifts intended directly for me. It's a delaying tactic, Jeffrey explained when I showed him the lawsuit. They're trying to complicate the case and drag it out, hoping your grandfather will give up or agree to a lesser settlement. Even more disturbing, my parents seemed to be hiding assets. Jeffrey's financial investigators discovered they had liquidated investment accounts and transferred funds to offshore banks in the months before Christmas, almost as if they had known their scheme was about to be exposed. How could they have known? I asked. Your grandfather had been asking more questions about his business finances, Jeffrey explained. He was concerned about some discrepancies he noticed after his heart attack made him think about putting his affairs in order. Your parents may have sensed he was getting suspicious. As if all this weren't enough, I received a text message from Tyler, my ex-boyfriend who had broken up with me 2 years earlier. We had dated for 3 years, and I had been completely blindsided when he suddenly ended things, claiming I was financially irresponsible and he couldn't build a future with someone who couldn't manage money. I just heard what happened with your parents, his message read. Can we talk? There's something you should know. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him for coffee. Tyler looked the same, handsome in a conventional way with his neat haircut and button-down shirt. He seemed nervous, fidgeting with his coffee cup. I owe you an apology, he began, and an explanation. What he told me next made me feel physically ill. Your parents approached me about 6 months into our relationship, he confessed. They said they were concerned about your spending habits and wanted to make sure you were being responsible. They offered to pay me to keep an eye on your finances and report back to them. They what? I whispered, feeling the coffee shop tilt around me. At first I said no, he continued. But they were persistent. They increased the amount, and eventually I agreed. It started small, just letting them know if you made any big purchases. But over time, they wanted more details. So you were spying on me? For money? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He had the decency to look ashamed. It sounds terrible when you put it that way, but yes. They deposited $500 into my account every month. They said it was for your own good, that you weren't ready to handle your inheritance. What inheritance? I didn't even know about it. That's just it, Tyler said. They told me about the trust and the house. Said they were managing it until you were more financially mature. I thought you knew about it, but just weren't allowed to access it yet. I felt sick. So when you broke up with me, he couldn't meet my eyes. They told me to make it about your financial habits. They thought if you believed you were bad with money, you wouldn't question why you never had enough. They were afraid if we got more serious, you might start wondering why I seemed to have more money than you, even though we had similar jobs. I stood up, nearly knocking over my chair. You let me believe I wasn't good enough, that I was irresponsible and immature. You broke my heart for a monthly paycheck. I'm sorry, Noel, he said miserably. I know it doesn't make up for anything, but I wanted you to know the truth. Your parents manipulated a lot of people, including me. I walked out of the coffee shop in a daze, another piece of my past forever tainted by my parents' deception. They hadn't just stolen my money. They had actively worked to keep me financially insecure and emotionally dependent. They had paid my boyfriend to spy on me, and then dump me in a way that would reinforce their narrative that I wasn't ready for financial independence. The revelation left me feeling more alone than ever. Who could I trust if the people closest to me had been conspiring against me for years? The only answer that came to mind was Grandpa Theo, and even he was now in a hospital bed because of all this. That night, I sat on the floor of my soon-to-be former apartment, surrounded by half-packed boxes, and allowed myself to cry for everything I had lost: my family, my home, my sense of security, and years of my life spent struggling unnecessarily. I didn't know if I would ever recover what was taken from me, financially or emotionally. All I knew was that I couldn't go back to being the person I was before that fateful Christmas dinner. That person had been living in a carefully constructed illusion, and now that the illusion was shattered, I had to figure out who I really was and what I really wanted. February brought freezing rain and the beginning of court proceedings. Grandpa Theo had been released from the hospital but was under strict orders to avoid stress. Easier said than done when your own son was trying to justify stealing millions from you and your granddaughter. My parents' defense strategy became clear during the first hearing. Paint Grandpa Theo as a controlling patriarch who used money to manipulate the family, and me as his spoiled, naive favorite who didn't understand the complexities of family business arrangements. Theodore Williams has always used his wealth as a weapon, their attorney argued before the judge. He dangled financial rewards to ensure compliance and withheld them as punishment. My clients simply received what was promised to them through verbal agreements for years of dedicated service. I sat next to Jeffrey, trying to maintain a neutral expression, as the attorney essentially accused my grandfather of being a financial abuser and my parents of being his victims. As for the trust and property supposedly intended for Noel Williams, the attorney continued, my clients were explicitly instructed by Theodore to manage these assets until Miss Williams demonstrated financial maturity. Their actions were within the spirit of their fiduciary responsibilities, if not the strict letter. Jeffrey demolished these arguments systematically, presenting bank records showing the systematic theft, trust documents with clear language about my right to the funds, and testimony from other business associates about how generously Grandpa Theo had always compensated my parents. But what I wasn't prepared for was how personal the attacks would become. During my deposition, my parents' attorney tried to portray me as irresponsible and entitled. He brought up every financial mistake I had ever made: the credit card I had maxed out in college, the time I had bounced a rent check, even a parking ticket I had been late paying. Isn't it true that your grandfather has always favored you over your brother? He asked. That he took you on special trips, gave you special gifts, made you feel like his chosen one? He loves both of us, I replied. He's always been generous with both me and Aaron. Yet you received a house and a trust fund, while Aaron received nothing comparable, correct? I didn't even know about those things until recently, I pointed out. And Grandpa paid for Aaron's entire college education. Mine too. The questioning went on for hours, designed to wear me down, to make me slip and say something that would damage our case. By the end, I was exhausted and emotionally raw, but the worst was yet to come. My mother's testimony introduced a new and painful dimension to the case. Theodore always favored Noel because she reminds him of his late wife, my mother, she said tearfully on the stand. She has the same artistic talent, the same mannerisms. It was as if he was trying to recreate my mother through his granddaughter. She went on to claim that Grandpa Theo had always been controlling and that my father had worked tirelessly to build the real estate business while my grandfather took the credit. The trust and house were Theodore's way of ensuring Noel would be dependent on him, just like my mother was, she testified. We were trying to protect her from his manipulation. We wanted her to stand on her own 2 feet, to be independent. It was a masterful performance, mixing truth, half-truths, and outright lies in a way that made it difficult to untangle. I knew my grandfather had loved my grandmother deeply and saw her artistic talent in me, but the idea that he was trying to control me through money, that my parents were somehow protecting me by keeping me in the dark and stealing my inheritance? It was absurd. Yet, I could see some of the court personnel softening toward my parents as my mother wept and my father placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. They looked like concerned parents being vilified for trying to protect their child. I looked like the ungrateful daughter suing over money. They're good, I whispered to Jeffrey during a recess. Really good at manipulating people. They've had years of practice, he replied grimly. But facts are facts, and the judge will see through the performance. The legal battle dragged on through February and into March. The initial hearing led to further discovery, more depositions, financial experts testifying about accounting practices and fiduciary responsibilities. Each day seemed to bring a new attack, a new accusation, a new family secret exposed to public scrutiny. Meanwhile, my personal life continued to deteriorate. I had returned to work, but my performance was suffering. I couldn't focus, missed deadlines, and snapped at colleagues. My boss called me in for another meeting, this time more stern than sympathetic. I understand you're going through something difficult, he said, but I can't make exceptions forever. If your work doesn't improve, we'll have to put you on formal probation. I found a new apartment, but it was further from work, smaller than my previous place, and more expensive. The moving costs depleted what little savings I had managed to accumulate. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was supposedly a millionaire on paper, but in reality, I was broker than ever and at risk of losing my job. Therapy continued to be my lifeline, but even Dr. Winters noticed I was struggling more. You're exhibiting signs of depression and anxiety, she told me during a particularly difficult session. Have you thought about medication to help you through this period? I had, but the idea of adding prescription costs to my mounting expenses made me hesitate. Everything in my life felt precarious, as if I were standing on a crumbling ledge with no safety net. The breaking point came in late March. Grandpa Theo and I had just sat through another grueling day in court, listening to my father testify about how he had built the business from nothing while my grandfather played golf and collected the profits. It was a complete reversal of reality. My grandfather had worked tirelessly his entire life, only slowing down in his late 60s, long after my father joined the business. We were having a quiet dinner at his house afterward, both too tired to say much, when his phone rang. He looked at the screen, frowned, and answered on speaker. Theodore, it's Jack. We need to talk. My father's voice filled the dining room. Grandpa Theo glanced at me, and I nodded for him to continue the call. What about? Grandpa asked neutrally. This has gone on long enough, my father said, his tone reasonable and calm, as if he weren't in the middle of a multi-million-dollar lawsuit with his own father and daughter. We're family. We should be able to work this out without more court battles. I'm listening, Grandpa said. Martha and I are prepared to make a compromise. We'll return half of Noel's trust money and sign the house over to her. In exchange, you drop all charges related to the business management and reinstate us in our positions. We can put this whole unfortunate episode behind us and be a family again. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After everything they had done, after all the lies and theft and manipulation, they wanted to return half of what they stole from me and none of what they stole from Grandpa, and in return, to be given back control of his business? I started to object, but Grandpa held up his hand, asking for my silence. That's an interesting proposal, Jack, he said carefully. Let me think about it. Don't take too long, my father replied. This offer has an expiration date. And Theodore, I know you want to keep the family together. This is the way to do it. After he hung up, I stared at my grandfather in disbelief. You're not actually considering this, are you? He looked tired, every one of his 72 years showing on his face. I don't know, Noel. Maybe it would be best to put this behind us. The stress isn't good for any of us, especially not at my age. They stole millions of dollars, I reminded him. They lied, they manipulated, they betrayed us both. And now they want to just walk back into your business like nothing happened? They're still your parents, he said quietly. And Jack is still my son, whatever mistakes he's made. Family is family. Something in me snapped. All the stress, anxiety, hurt, and anger of the past 3 months coalesced into a burning clarity. No, I said firmly. Family doesn't steal from family. Family doesn't lie and manipulate and gaslight. What they did wasn't a mistake, Grandpa. It was calculated, sustained criminal behavior over years. And if you let them get away with it, they'll just find new ways to take advantage of you. He didn't respond, just stared down at his barely touched dinner. I know you're tired, I continued, more gently now, I know the legal battle is draining, but if we give up now, everything you built, everything you worked for all these years, will end up in the hands of people who have proven they can't be trusted with it. Is that really what you want? I just want peace, he admitted. I want my family back. The family you think you want back never really existed, I said, tears filling my eyes. It was an illusion, a performance. My parents showed us who they really are. Now we have to decide if we're going to believe them. He looked up at me, his eyes troubled. I'll think about it. I left his house that night with a heavy heart, uncertain if I had gotten through to him. The next day, I received a text from him asking me to come by after work. When I arrived, I found him in his study with a woman I didn't recognize, a trim, professional-looking woman in her 50s. Noel, this is Patricia Dalton, he introduced us. She used to be my assistant before your father took over more of the day-to-day operations. Patricia shook my hand firmly. It's good to finally meet you, Noel. Your grandfather has told me a lot about you over the years. Patricia reached out to me after she heard about the lawsuit, Grandpa explained. She has information that might be helpful to our case. Over the next hour, Patricia laid out a devastating account of my father's business practices dating back to his earliest days in the company. She had documentation, copies of emails, memos, even recorded conversations that showed my father had been embezzling from the business, almost from the beginning. I tried to tell you years ago, she said to my grandfather. But Jack convinced you. I was just resentful because he was replacing me in the company hierarchy. After you let me go, I kept the evidence, thinking someday the truth would come out. Why come forward now? I asked. Because your grandfather was good to me for the 15 years I worked for him, she replied simply. And because what your parents did to both of you was wrong. Some things are more important than avoiding conflict. After Patricia left, Grandpa Theo sat quietly for a long time. Finally, he looked up at me, his expression resolved. No deal, he said. We fight this to the end, no matter how hard it gets. You were right, Noel. Some betrayals can't be papered over with compromises. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Whatever happened next, we would face it together, standing on the side of truth. With Patricia's evidence and our renewed determination, the legal landscape shifted dramatically. Jeffrey added her testimony and documentation to our case, creating a comprehensive picture of my parents' years of financial manipulation and fraud. What had been a contentious legal battle with emotional testimony on both sides became a straightforward case of embezzlement and breach of fiduciary duty. Faced with overwhelming evidence, my parents' attorney approached Jeffrey about a settlement. The terms were far different from what my father had proposed to Grandpa Theo. They would return all the money taken from my trust, plus interest. They would transfer the deed to my house immediately. They would repay the money embezzled from Grandpa Theo's business over a 5-year period, secured by liens on their assets. Most importantly, they would have no future role in any of Grandpa Theo's business enterprises. In exchange, Grandpa Theo and I would not press criminal charges. They would avoid potential jail time, but their reputation in the business community would be irreparably damaged. It's your decision, Jeffrey told us in his office in early April. We have a strong case if you want to pursue criminal charges, but a settlement guarantees you get your money back and puts this behind you faster. Grandpa Theo looked at me. What do you think, Noel? You've been hurt the most by all this. I thought about it carefully. Part of me wanted my parents to face the full consequences of their actions, but another part of me just wanted to move forward with my life. Let's take the settlement, I decided. Not for them, but for us. We've lost enough time and energy to this already. The settlement was finalized by the end of April. My parents signed the documents without looking at me. Aaron was there, standing behind them with a hostile glare. They were no longer the family I remembered and loved, but strangers who happened to share my DNA. It hurt, but it was also clarifying. I couldn't change the past or make them into different people. I could only control what I did next. The first order of business was moving into my house. The tenant's lease was up at the end of April, and they moved out on schedule. When I walked through the front door with my own key for the first time, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Joy at finally having a beautiful home of my own, sadness that it had taken such betrayal to get here, and determination to make this house a true sanctuary. The three-bedroom Craftsman had been well maintained, with hardwood floors, a fireplace in the living room, and a kitchen that had been recently updated. The backyard was small but private, with a mature apple tree and space for a garden. It was everything I had ever wanted in a home, and now it was really mine. With the first installment of the settlement money, I paid off my student loans and set up an emergency fund. The weight of financial insecurity that had been my constant companion for years lifted, allowing me to breathe fully for perhaps the first time in my adult life. But money couldn't solve all my problems. I was still struggling at work, my confidence shaken by months of stress and upheaval. After another difficult performance review, I made a decision that surprised even me. I quit. "Are you sure about this?" Grandpa Theo asked when I told him. "In this economy, giving up a steady job is risky." "I'm sure," I said with more confidence than I felt. That job was killing my creativity anyway. I've always wanted to start my own design studio, and now I have the resources to do it. Over the next month, I set up a home office in one of the spare bedrooms and began reaching out to contacts I had made over the years. To my surprise, many were excited about working with me directly. My first client was a small local brewery that needed branding and packaging design. Then came a boutique hotel wanting a website revamp, and a startup needing a complete visual identity. Williams Design Studio was born, with me as the founder, creative director, and currently sole employee. The work was challenging and sometimes overwhelming, but for the first time, I was creating on my terms, not following someone else's vision. The satisfaction of building something that was truly mine helped heal some of the wounds left by my parents' betrayal. Grandpa Theo was going through his own transformation. After the settlement, he restructured his business operations, bringing in professional management instead of relying on family. He asked for my input on modernizing the company's image, which led to my first major project, rebranding Williams Real Estate as Cornerstone Properties. "New name, new beginning," he said when I presented the logo and marketing materials, for both of us. Working together gave us time to rebuild our relationship on a more equal footing. I wasn't just his granddaughter anymore. I was a business partner, a confidant, and increasingly, a friend. We had weekly dinners where we talked about everything from business strategies to books we were reading to memories of my grandmother. "She would be so proud of you," he told me one evening as we sat on his patio watching the sunset. "Not just for standing up for yourself, but for what you're building now." Therapy continued to be essential as I processed the trauma of the past months. Dr. Winters helped me work through my trust issues and establish healthier boundaries in all my relationships. "Betrayal like you experienced doesn't heal overnight," she reminded me. "Be patient with yourself." Gradually, I built a new support system. Some friends who had distanced themselves during the lawsuit returned with apologies. Others remained gone, and I learned to accept that not all relationships are meant to last a lifetime. I joined a local art group and met people who shared my creative interests without any knowledge of my family drama. I even began dating again, cautiously, a photographer named Jake who understood my need to take things slowly. Summer arrived, bringing warm weather and a sense of new possibilities. My business was thriving, my house was becoming a home, and I had people in my life who genuinely cared about me, not what they could get from me. I had no contact with my parents or Aaron. Sometimes I saw their names in my phone's blocked caller list and felt a pang of sadness for what might have been. But I no longer felt responsible for fixing a relationship they had systematically destroyed over years of deception. As Christmas approached again, I felt a mix of dread and determination. The last Christmas had shattered my world. This one would be different. "Let's do something completely new this year," I suggested to Grandpa Theo. "No big dinner at your house, no elaborate decorations, something simple and genuine." We ended up hosting a small gathering at my house, just Grandpa Theo, a few of his old friends, some of my new ones, and Jake. We had a potluck dinner, played board games, and exchanged modest gifts. No drama, no tension, just warmth and laughter. As I looked around my living room at these people who had chosen to be part of my life, I realized something important. family isn't just about blood relationships. It's about honesty, respect, and genuine care for each other's well-being. My parents had given me life, but they had failed at the more important aspects of family. Now I was creating my own definition of what family meant. "A toast," Grandpa Theo said, raising his glass, "to new beginnings and hard-won wisdom. And to the truth," I added, "no matter how difficult." We clinked glasses as snow began to fall outside, covering the world in clean, fresh white, a fitting image for the fresh start we had all been given. The journey from that fateful Christmas dinner to this peaceful celebration had been painful beyond description. I had lost my illusions about my parents and brother, faced financial and emotional hardship, and been forced to rebuild my life from its foundations. But I had also discovered my own strength, claimed my independence, and learned that some betrayals, while devastating, can ultimately lead to liberation. "You know," Grandpa Theo said quietly as the others chatted around us, "I've been thinking about what all this has taught me. Money can be a blessing or a curse, depending on how you use it. Your parents let it corrupt them. They chose greed over integrity, over family. But you, Noel, you've shown that adversity can make you stronger, wiser, more compassionate. That's a gift more valuable than any trust fund." I squeezed his hand, too moved to speak. The grandfather who had once seemed larger than life to me was now my fellow traveler, both of us changed by what we had endured together. The house that should have been mine all along was finally my home. The trust that had been stolen from me was now funding my dreams on my terms. And the truth, painful as it had been, had set me free from a web of lies and manipulation. I wouldn't have chosen this path, but having walked it, I wouldn't go back to the comfortable illusions of the past. Sometimes the greatest gift is simply knowing where you stand and who stands with you. Everything else you can build for yourself, one day at a time, with honesty as your foundation. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted completely was hiding something important from you? How did you handle it? Please share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, consider giving it a like, subscribing to hear more stories like this one, and sharing it with someone who might need to hear that betrayal doesn't have to be the end of your story. Thank you for listening, and remember that the truth, while sometimes painful, is always the first step toward healing and growth.